Well, Dr. Greg Stride is the principal researcher at the independent think tank, the Local Government Information Unit. Morning to you, Greg.
Good morning.
Can you describe the situation currently, why councils find themselves in this financial dilemma?
Yeah, the difficulty is that since around 2010, the amount of money that councils receive from the central government has been decreasing. It's gone down by about 20%. And at exactly the same time, the demand for council services has been going up and up and up. Think about spending on things like adult social care or homelessness.
And is that 20% in real terms, Greg? Sorry.
Yeah, in real terms per capita, I believe. That's from the IFS.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you can see there's a major reduction. But what happens is that councils have a very small number of different levers that they can pull. So they can increase council tax, but only by a small amount. They can sell assets, as you've been speaking about. And increasingly, those councils in a really bad, precarious position can, through the exceptional financial support scheme, borrow to bridge that gap.
Yeah. The other difficulty some local authorities find themselves in is that when funding for local authorities was decreased in the 2010s, they were encouraged to look at more innovative ways of effectively making money. And one way of doing that was borrowing to invest in the kinds of sort of bricks and mortar and other opportunities that might be available locally as a way of, in the future, sustaining their financial commitments. But the problem is, that was fine when interest rates were low. Since that time, interest rates have risen quite a lot and they find themselves with this enormous debt to carry, don't they?
It's exactly right that is a problem in a small number of councils. But the issue is that debt is increasing across councils on the whole, and that includes councils that are extremely well run. So in a survey we did earlier this year, about a quarter of all councils believe that the amount of debt that their council has is a problem. And a third of all councils are saying that they might not be in a position to pass a balanced budget in the next 5 years. So we're in a situation where where we saw Section 114 notices maybe in the last 5 years, it was often where there had been governance failures or particular difficulties. But at the moment, it looks like that's increasing to be councils across the piece.
And Section 114 notices are what?
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's the effective bankruptcies. So that's if a council can't balance its budget year on year.
Yeah, and we've seen that, as you say, in an increasing number of cases. So the government does allow special circumstances in which councils can borrow money for to fund day-to-day spending. And that really is not sustainable as a model in the long term, is it?
Not at all, no, because the money that you borrow has to be paid back through your normal budgets, which means that the more that you borrow, the more it eats into the spending on other services. And councils, as we know, don't have a huge amount to spend on other services as it is, which is exactly why you see the reduction in spending on services. So things like the reduction on spending on parks or arts and leisure and these sorts of things, the spending that is not protected by the law, and also why you see the asset sales that were mentioned in your piece. It really is, like Paul said in the piece, it's a kind of payday loan. It's a short-term solution to a very, very long-term problem.
And when we think about the issues facing, for example, social care that local authorities are in part responsible for an increasing elderly population, when you look at increasing demands around special educational needs for children, and we've talked about a lack of provision for them and the challenges families are facing, the kind of responsibilities that local councils now face and how they fund these in the future, it stresses me out even to think about it. So what is
you're not alone there.
Yeah, well, what is the long-term solution that is sustainable and affordable?
I think this is where the crux of the issue is. So I'm pleased that you mentioned social care there, because social care can make up around 80% of what a local authority spends their money on. I think what we need first and foremost is a solution to the social care funding issue. And that's what the Casey Commission that the government set up is looking into. But besides that, we also need, I would say, a review of what we expect councils to do and how much money they need in order to do that. So we've recently had the Fair Funding Review, which looks at relatively how much does each council need. If we have a big pot of money, how do we share it out? But really, I think we need to be looking at the absolute need. How much do we expect councils to be able to do and what do they need? And then secondly, I think we should be looking at further powers for councils. So that might include fiscal powers, so the power to raise taxes in different ways, or it might include a reform of council tax, which is a tax that has been increasingly inefficient for raising money. And then finally, I think we need to think about looking at councils more generally and how they work together and how that money should be shared between them.
Right. So there could be more opportunities for cooperation in order to, I suppose, increase efficiency.
Especially as we go through this period of reorganisation where some councils are being reformed in order to be bigger.
These
I think
big
that's the next
unitary authorities, that is happening anyway.
Yeah.
The government has said that they have put £3.4 billion of new grant funding in for local services on top of the £69 billion already made available this year to boost council finances. And they say we are going to go further to reform the funding system, including these new unitary councils. Now, when you hear big numbers like that, I got to be honest, it's sort of meaningless. I don't know how significant that is in terms of overall budget. I don't know whether that's additional money from money that's previously been promised or that's earmarked via council tax. Can you explain that and also let us know whether that will make a significant difference?
So that's so the roughly how much money goes on councils is roughly 100 billion. So I mean it's a significant increase, but it's a small significant increase. It's roughly in line with what we've seen over the last year or 5 years or so of council money going up, which essentially hasn't been enough to plug the issue. So I think what we do need is a more comprehensive review of exactly how much we expect councils to be able to doing. Because even with these increases that we've seen over the last few years, councils have still been reducing services and selling their assets.
Yeah. Just one quick question here, because it's come through on the texts. When discussing the dire financial state of councils, it's always assumed their costs are for providing public services. The ever-increasing costs of pensions, some overly generous, in the view of this listener, are a major cost, 30 to 40% of council tax receipts in some instances. Is that correct?
I can't speak to the exact numbers, but pensions are a significant cost, as are national insurance contributions for councils. I mean, councils, like any other employer, have to spend all of this money on making sure that their staff are well maintained. The issue is that councils, even with these sort of relatively generous public sector pensions, are still having trouble filling positions. And we do need the council workforce to be maintained in order to make sure that people do the jobs that we rely on councils for.